and cut out all of the particulars of what you're thinking about. What's left? You see, certain logical concepts that are in use, a conceptual apparatus that's functioning there. Yeah. Okay. All right, he's still not satisfied that this is enough, and for two reasons. One is the fact that we have a variety of sense perceptions coming at us through 5 different senses, so that our perceptions are so utterly fragmented in their sources, yet somehow or other unified in our experience. So you need to explain the unity of our perceptions, the unity of the perceptual field. Okay? The second thing is that while you have the forms of perception, and the categories of understanding, what gets them together? How do they meet? This is Kant's equivalent of the mind-body problem. The perceptions that come into the mind, and then the understanding that gets a hold of that. Perceptions are particular, the categories are universal. How do they get together? And that's what he's talking about in the schematism of the understanding. Okay? So this is the unity of perception, and this has to do with the unification of perception and thought in the understanding. Okay? Now, this is a segment that I did not ask you to outline, but tremendously important for the completion of the story, and for some of the things which arise out of it. Now, as far as the unifying of experience is concerned, his initial statement is on page 391. And I want you to take a look at that. It's the second paragraph on 391, first column, where he says this: if every single representation stood by itself, okay, every particular sense idea, simple idea, if every simple idea stood by itself, isolated, separated from the others, nothing like what we call knowledge could ever arise, because knowledge forms a whole of representations connected, compared with each other. Now, how do you get to begin with from simple ideas to complex ideas? Hume said there are principles of association, psychological association, resemblance, contiguity, cause and effect. What's Kant going to say? Well, he says, I ascribe to the senses a synopsis. Synopsis, seeing together, opsis from optical. Synopsis is seeing it together. I ascribe to the senses capacity to see it together, because in their intuition they contain something manifold. There corresponds to it always a synthesis. Receptivity can make knowledge possible only when joined with spontaneity. This spontaneity appears threefold, which must necessarily take place in every kind of knowledge. First, there is apprehension, the synthesis that is apprehension, apprehending. Okay? That is to say, being aware of it, grasping it as one. And the apprehension is in representations. The apprehension of representations as modifications of the soul in the intuition, the anshan, the insight. Secondly, reproduction of them in the imagination. There's that funny word again. Reproduction of them in the imagination. And that sounds like it's the old use of the word. When you're reproducing something in the imagination, it sounds like memory. And third is the recognition in concepts. So you have the synthesis of apprehension, you have synthesis in reproduction, you have synthesis in recognition. And in the pages that follow, he takes up each of these. Now, the apprehension is being aware of representations under the form of time. That is to say, you apprehend things as a temporal unity. Remember? Burp, burp, burp. Now, you heard that as 3, but you heard it as 1. A temporal unity. And particularly when I speed it up, burp, you hear it as 1. Oh, maybe if you listen closely, 3, maybe 4. So that there is a synthesis that goes on in the act of apprehension under the form of time. Now, reproduction comes on 392. Reproduction by the imagination. Yeah, and he appeals to the association of ideas imaginatively. The imaginative association of ideas. Yeah. Because if you try to reproduce that sound that I made, you must first imagine it in reproducing it. It's an imaginative reproduction. Yes, sir. So the imagination is at work then in being able to reproduce it in memory, you see, in memory, or in actual fact, imagination. And in order to associate ideas by virtue of their similarity and in developing empirical concepts of greater generality, then we have to remember other cases in order to combine with these cases. So the imagination is at work in any generalization. And then there is recognition in regards to concepts. Recognition in regards to concepts. General concepts that are necessary for recognition. Now, those general concepts, of course, are drawn from the categorical structure of the understanding. Now, look on page 394. 394. And he gives you an example. The first full paragraph on 394. No knowledge is possible without a concept, however obscure and imperfect. And a concept is always something general that can serve as a rule. So you measure the complex idea you've been developing in relationship to that concept that's the rule. The concept of a body serves as a rule to our knowledge of external phenomena, according to the unity of the manifold which is thought light. You see. Now, you get a general complex idea of that thing and that thing and that thing, you see. And what's involved in recognition is the realization that all of these meet the rule for using the abstract concept body. Okay. What's a body? It's a thing, something that exists, a substance. Look that up in his list of categories. So the concept of body, whenever we perceive something outside us, necessitates the representation of extension, impermeability, shape. Yeah. Necessity is always founded on transcendental conditions, and so forth. All right, you have that then representation. Now, you have then three subjective sources at work in this unity of apperception. Apprehension, reproduction, recognition. This is the mechanism at work in the mind, the way it functions, in producing that inner synthesis. Now, the outcome of this, then, is that there is a unity to apperception that is transcendental. It is in the inner resource of the human consciousness. And this is what gives rise in Kant's mind to the question, what is this I, this self, this mind that unifies? You see, that's the old issue, isn't it? How naive Descartes now sounds with his, I think, therefore I exist, a thinking thing. Where on earth does he get that? I think. Oh my goodness, that's a complicated process. Apprehension, reproduction, recognition, forms, categories, I think. You hate it just to think that. You know? I think, therefore what? I. A thing, there's the thing in all of it. All you've got is mechanism, function. You see? The most I can say at this stage in the analysis, Kant in effect tells us, the most I can say at this fact in the analysis is that I am a transcendental unity of apperception. I'm the unified totality of all my thought. Well, that's a bit better than what old David Hume did. When he said I'm a bundle of perceptions, but didn't have anything to bundle them together with. At least, to bundle them together, Kant has apprehension, reproduction, recognition, and all that implies. And later on, when he gets into the transcendental dialectic on Friday, well, when we get into his transcendental dialectic on Friday, we'll see what he has to say about the conception of something more like a soul. But all he has to start with for the I at this juncture, and all he can be sure of at this juncture, is that I'm a transcendental unity of apperception. That's the I. Now, in a way, that's very much in keeping with the whole tradition from John Locke. You see, that business of personal identity. You see, how do I know what I am? How do I know the I? What is the I that I know? And in the empiricist tradition, it depended on memory. You see, and all of the present awarenesses I have of my past and present, that's the I. At least that's the empirical I, the I that I'm aware of. But Kant has gone further than that, you see, because that's an atomized kind of I. He's got a unified kind of I. It's a big step forward in that sense. And it's because of the a priori that he can call it a unified I. You see, because the I is contributing its unity. Now, when I say the I is contributing its unity, it's not just that the I is unifying its world that it imagines out there, creating our world. The I is creating its own unity. I create myself. Well, Kant doesn't put it that way, but Sartre does. You see. And Sartre is able to put it that way, I create myself, because Kant gave him the tools for doing it. I said that existentialism was a byproduct of what Kant was doing. All right, so the transcendental unity of apperception. Yeah, the question, of course, is still whether nature in itself corresponds to the way we think. And on that, take a look at his conclusion to this section on 396. 396. The bottom of the second column. It sounds, no doubt, very strange and absurd that nature should have to conform to our subjective ground and be dependent on it with respect to her laws. Now remember, the Copernican revolution that Kant was calling was that it's not the case that our knowledge is dependent on what nature is like, but that nature is dependent upon what we think, at least nature for us is. And it sounds no doubt very strange that nature should have to conform to us, rather than us conforming our knowledge to nature. But if we consider that what we call nature is nothing but the whole of phenomena, nothing but appearances, that's what nature is, what we experience. Not a thing in itself, but a number of representations in mind. Then we'll no longer be surprised that we only see her through the fundamental faculty of our knowing, the transcendental perception, and in that unity without which it couldn't be called the object of all possible experience, that is nature. In other words, once you get the way in which the world of nature is unified for us, then you see that what we call nature is conforming to us, rather than us simply passively conforming to it. So you anticipate there his phenomena noumena distinction. Okay, any questions at that point? I'm ready otherwise for the schematization. Okay, 403 is where the schematization begins. And here, as I said, the question is, how do the forms and the categories get connected? Because the one is dealing with particular sense experiences, and the other is dealing with abstract concepts. They are heterogeneous. And if they're so heterogeneous, do they have any point of contact? In other words, the question is, do they have anything in common? Any point of contact. That was the trouble with Descartes' pineal gland. A pineal gland is a physical thing. How can it help you make contact with an immaterial thing? See, that's why the pineal gland was such a goof. I didn't say goof off, I said goof. Descartes' mistake. And obviously Kant does not want to pull another pineal gland on us, or anything analogous to it. So you've got to find some commonality between the sensibility and the understanding, between the forms and the categories. What's that going to be? Well, in a word, time. Time. How come time? Well, you remember his discussions of space and time? Where space is the form of the outer sense and time is the form of the inner sense. In Lockean language, space is the form of sensation and time is the form of all our reflections. Where is your time consciousness? What is it called? The sequence in your consciousness. That's why time drags or races or stands still. Time consciousness. Races, drags, stands still. So time is the form of the reflective consciousness. But of course it's in the inner consciousness, in our reflective awareness, that we're aware of our concepts, abstract ideas. You see? So they have that point of contact. Time is in common to both sense perception and thought, because they both go on in the consciousness. So what he tries to show then is that we can relate the concept of time to all of the categories. We can relate the concept of time to all of the categories. And what we develop then is an abstraction. You see, you can call it a temporalized conception of cause and effect. Isn't that the ordinary way we think about cause and effect? The cause must be the concurrent with or antecedent to the effect. You see, we think it that way. And the idea of substance is of something that is. It has an enduring identity, continuity, time. And so these categories in relationship to time provide us with schema. Now that's his term, schema. I suppose you might call it a conceptual model, a paradigm, an abstraction, something of that sort, schema. You use the word schema in some other regards. But look on page 404, the top of the page, where he says the fact is that our pure sensuous concepts do not depend on images of objects, but on schemata. That's the plural of schema. No image of a triangle in general is ever adequate to its concept. How do you think the concept of triangle? The little picture of lines in your mind are things that have breadth as well as length. Lines don't have that. No, what you have is something that exists nowhere but in thought. Not in sense images, but in thought, in abstraction. And it's a rule for the synthesis of imagination with respect to triangular things. So you develop mental abstractions, concepts, you verbalize them. Maybe provide mathematical formulae for them. But you don't picture them. So the schemata. And you find therefore on page 405 that he runs through the various categories. The schema of substance, 405, first complete paragraph. The schema of substance is the permanence of the real in time. The representation of it is a substratum for the empirical determination of time in general, which therefore remains while everything else changes. So we think of substance as a substratum. That's a schema, it's an abstraction. And in the next paragraph, the schema of cause and causality is the real which, when one's supposed to exist, is always followed by something else. You think of it as an abstraction. You define a cause. A definition in that sense is like a rule, a model, schema, and so forth all the way through. The schematization of the understanding. So on 405, halfway down the page, he says the schemata are nothing but determinations of time a priori, according to rules. There's ways of thinking about time according to rules. And as applied to all possible objects, they refer, in the order of the categories, to series of time, contents of time, the order of time, the comprehension of time. So the schemata, then, are the conditions that are involved in thinking. Okay? Schematization of the understanding. Well, with that in hand, the section on the phenomena and the noumena follows very easily, and I encourage you to read that because this is really the conclusion of the whole transcendental analytic. The conclusion of the whole transcendental analytic. The ground of distinction of all subjects in the phenomena and noumena. Phenomena, remember, appearances. The thing for me. The ding